Good overnight and welcome on in to another episode of From Day One, the overnight edition with Art Bell, ready to rock and roll through the Dominion in the overnight. Tonight, we go back to November 3rd, 2015, with guest Linda Moulton, my apologies, Howe. And tonight we talk about something that a lot of us may not have ever heard of, but I hope we all get a great education in the next couple of nights. Tonight we're talking about theories, megastructures, and much, much more. So, from the world's 25 different time zones and the great American Southwest, Art Bell bids us welcome as we go back in time for tonight's Midnight in the Desert.
From the high desert and the great American Southwest, I bid you all good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever it may be, wherever you are in all 25 time zones covered by this program like a blanket, a nice, warm, informative blanket called Midnight in the Desert. My name is Art Bell, and it's my pleasure to be here with you tonight. Linda Moulton Howe up in a bit. A lot of really hot stuff, too. There's a lot going on right now. So, 2 rules for the show, 2 rules only, and that is no bad language. Don't need it. Doesn't make a point. Well, I guess it does, but we don't need it. 1 call per show. So, let's look very quickly at a little bit of news that does seem to be out there. This is pretty interesting. U.S. satellites have looked carefully now at the explosion. I think that's the right word, of the Russian airplane, passenger airplane, just before it went down, and we have seen, an explosion, or a very large heat signature prior to it burning up. Now, this could be something else, but I'm not convinced we're ever going to find out. I mean, it's in the hands of countries that, frankly, I don't think are going to tell us. ISIS is taking the credit for bringing this plane down. Rarely do they claim credit for something they actually haven't done, so I'm inclined to think, I bet that's it. But we'll have to wait and see. Here's an interesting story. Americans are hot, but not too bothered by global warming. Most Americans know and can see the climate is changing, but they're just not worried about it. Not worried. I personally think the time to worry for most Americans is going to be as water is lapping at their ankles. And they'll look down and go, oh, global warming. Of course, by then, New York will be underwater, Miami will be underwater. I wonder if LA will be underwater. Probably. Santa Barbara for sure. A lot of our big major cities, but, until it's lapping right at their ankles, I don't think that the American people are going to notice. We're not going to do anything about it in time, I am convinced. Gigantic earthworks in Kazakhstan that are practically invisible from the ground. This comes from theanomalous.com. It seems the earthworks, seen from space, are reminiscent of Peru's Nazca lines, but more numerous, more varied in shape and size. These structures are not geoglyphs like the Nazca lines, but unlike the Nazca lines, these formations serve some sort of function rather than display artwork. Some researchers believe. Others argue, of course. We can really only guess at what may have come before us, other than really, really, really hard news, about what's dug up from the ground. And even then. Oh, and on artbell.com, I think this is a major news story, actually. NASA is confirming that the impossible EM drive thruster actually works. This is very exciting. Electromagnetic drive that actually works, something that could take us to the stars. Now, at what speed ultimately, I don't know, but if you continue, once you get away from Earth and our influence, and you begin to thrust, no matter how little it is, I don't really want to say how little, but even if it's fairly small, you will eventually get to very, very great speeds if you keep thrusting. Right? So this is potentially earth-shaking news. I think that's the way to put it. And there's actually a picture of the EM drive that NASA is saying, my goodness, it works. Now, they're not sure how. They're just sure that they've tested and it works. I'd say that's pretty big news. As, of course, was my favorite star, the story that I broke now so long ago on KIC 8462852, and it still hasn't been named. We ought to call it something. Why don't we call it Tabitha? Wouldn't don't you think that might be appropriate? Tabitha, the star. Anyway, I'm sure tonight's guest is going to have some fair bit to share with us about all this. Linda Moulton Howe is a graduate of Stanford University with a master's degree in communications. She devoted her documentary, film, television, radio, and writing and reporting career to productions concerning science, medicine, and the environment. That'll keep you busy. Ms. Howe has received local, national, and international awards, including 3 regional Emmys, a national Emmy nomination for the Station Peabody Award for Medical Programming. Really? Linda's documentaries included A Strange Harvest and Strange Harvests in 1993, which explored the worldwide animal mutilation mystery. Tonight she will talk to us about many things, but I suspect perhaps out front will be the Kepler discovery. And it's just awesome. What can I tell you about it? As you know, we broke this story very, very early. Others, I don't know, ignored it. I'm not sure what to say about that, but they did. And it's reasonably the biggest story of our lifetimes. Now, it may turn out to be nothing, or, as Michio Kaku said, the biggest story in 500 years. I still don't know how he chose that 500-year mark, because I think no matter how far back you go, well, until you get to 2,000 years plus, right, there could be no bigger story, could there, than we're not alone? There are others out there. There are others who, in fact, may be not just 1,500 light years ahead, roughly, but that plus whatever they were when they obscured their sun with an energy-gathering device, if that's what it is, a Dyson sphere. Anyway, Linda will have a lot to say about this and interviewed some of the principals involved in this as well. I think, the more I think about it, Tabitha would be a great name. Tabitha the Star. I'm going to think that one over, but I kind of like it. Linda Howe coming up in just a moment. Stay right where you are.
As always, we'll return to Mid-Island and Other as soon as our musical interlude concludes.
Screen calls. We trust you, but remember, the NSA. Well, you know, to call the show, please dial 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952-CALL-ART. Okay. So here is Linda Moulton Howe, probably coming to us from New Mexico, right?
Yeah, Albuquerque.
Albuquerque, that's right. All right. You know, when I dial you, Linda, I'm calling you in Albuquerque through Roswell.
The cushion shot of history.
Yeah, I've got a Roswell phone line. It was one of those things. Why not? What the hell?
Yeah.
Have a Roswell.
A little magic to our connection.
That's right. All right.
One other piece of magic is you're awfully close to the name of the star that Professor Jason Wright, the astronomer at Penn State, who's a good friend of Professor Tabitha Boyajian, who did the 14-page, we'll call it the paper in the Royal Astronomical Society that set all this off in September. He calls the star KIC 846-2852 Tabby's star, and because he calls her Tabby.
I was going to say Tabby. I had a feeling Tabby would be just perfect, actually.
Yeah, and it should be named after her. She is the one who has led all of this work the last 4 years. She helped organize the Planet Hunters project, and it is so interesting that it is the civilians working in the Planet Hunters project trying to wade their way through 150,000 stars in the Milky Way galaxy studied by the Kepler Space Telescope, and it was getting everybody with computers all over the place to try to look at these various dimmings and brightenings in stars, looking for, they thought, like a planet or planets that would be orbiting stars, because we've been on a big planet hunting mission for a long time. And this is why this is all extremely exciting, that the bottom line is after they had gone past 100,000 stars, and some reports are that Kepler has actually looked at 150,000 stars through Planet Hunters, that this is singular art. This is unique. This is the one star in all of these stars in which the brightening and the dimming is not symmetric, and this is really important. If you look at what we have been doing for the last decade with looking at what planets at various light years away, it would dim and brighten around stars looking for planets. The planet comes around the star depending upon how big it is, and there is sort of a bell-shaped curve. The dimming will rise. There will be about a max of 1% dimming, and then as the planet goes on around the star, it gets brighter, and it's what is called symmetrical dimming and brightening.
Mm-hmm.
Those are normal planets, and take that number, 1%. 1% is the average dimming. Well, what happened 2 years ago is that Tabitha Boyajian and Planet Hunters, they got up to 15% dimming and brightening on this KIC 846. We'll call it tonight. Let's call it Tabby's star.
Let's.
Yeah, and so 15% after 2 years of Kepler's looking, that broke everybody's record.
Did the mainstream get it wrong? Let me tell you, Linda, how it broke. It broke first in very low-level internet sites, but actually fairly trustworthy internet sites. I found it at that point, and I went, oh my God, this is a giant story, and got it on the air right away. It took about it took just 2 days after that it began to hit the mainstream press. And in a lot of the mainstream press, for example, the Washington Post, they suggest it has dimmed at times by as much as 22%. Is that inaccurate?
Well, that's what I was coming to.
Okay.
I'm looking at Tabitha's paper right now, and she's got a summary of all of the varying dimmings and brightening experiences, and when, after 4 years, it went to 22%, that is the most. And that is, as Professor Wright, and he comes into this, Jason Thomas Wright, at Penn State, not Yale. Tabitha is at Yale University, but he's a colleague, and there are many people who have been helping on this project. He came into this because when you get the kind of brightening that went up and down, as he said, they've had dozens of these episodes, some at 10%, some at 7%, some at 5%, the 22%, 15%. What this means, when you add it to the fact that they are not getting symmetric dimming brightening. This is erratic. This is multiple, and that means from their point of view that there have to be multiple objects that are huge, gigantic, and that they are many. There was one paper that I read called it a mess of objects, and it is that which astronomically is of great, I would say, great impact on all of this. And then it was the UK newspaper, the Mail, that took it to that level of alien megastructures. And that is when the megastructure issue came up. I think that's what they had all been talking about privately behind the scenes anyway. They reached out to SETI and Green Bank. But when it was sort of blasted out by the UK papers as could there be alien megastructures around this star, that's when the astronomers want to pull back and go into the shadows because they're not prepared to say. Well, this leads again to my getting in touch with Professor Jason Wright because...
All right, one more question, Linda. Jason Wright. In here, in the Washington Post, it quotes Jason Wright. It says, to Wright, it looked like the kind of star he and his colleagues had been waiting for. If none of the ordinary reasons for the star's flux quite seemed to fit, perhaps an ordinary one was in order aliens. And it occurred to me at that moment that both Tabitha and especially Wright would think long and hard, really long and hard about their careers, their lives, their wives, their families, their future before they would ever utter such a word.
Well, now you come to why they're taking this so seriously, and there's a bunch of reasons. And what Professor Wright agreed to do for Tabitha and this effort was to put together a protocol of like 10 things that if you said, if this were a huge structure out around this star and that it fit into the category of, say, the hypothetical Dyson sphere that Freeman Dyson suggested as far back as 1960, that's when he wrote up a paper. It was called Search for Artificial Stellar Sources of Infrared Radiation. It was published in the most prestigious journal of all, Science, and it was Dyson's concept that if you have an advanced civilization, Michio Kaku has taken Dyson's work and has taken the Nikolai Kardashev's work also about type 1, 2, and 3 civilizations based on their energy usage and how they would get that energy. And so when Dyson suggested in a kind of thought experiment that he wrote up for Science that all technological civilizations constantly increase their demand for energy. And so he concluded that if a human civilization expanded, that the energy that we would have, that we would be needing, would come to a time when it would be the total energy output of our sun. And that's what led Freeman Dyson to come up with this idea that if you're advanced enough, and Michio would say it's like a civilization 2, which is on the Kardashev scale, a civilization that's capable of harnessing energy from a sun, then what he thought was a civilization could construct something either all around the sun or close to the sun in a structure that would capture the emissions from the star for energy use. And that is why when this story broke and the Daily Mail and others put in their headlines, are there megastructures around this star that has this strange dimming and brightening pattern? That's what the history is behind that headline. And the astronomers are reluctant to get into that category before they have eliminated everything else. And here we get to the huge work that Professor Wright has been doing, trying to come up with this protocol that would say, okay, if this were, let's say, that it is a circular planet or a circular object, if it comes in front a big mature KIC at 1480 or Tabby star 1,480 light years away, it's going to have symmetrical dimming and brightening. because it's circular.
Right.
They have not seen that, as far as I understand in interviewing him, they have not seen that in a single one of these dimming episodes. It is erratic.
All right. Quick interjection here, and that is the following. Linda, if what you say is true, and as Kaku says, it would be a Type 2 civilization, they've harnessed the power of a star, then let's think about this for a second. What we're observing is a Type 2 civilization, if that's what it is, nearly 1,500 years ago. Now, if you look at our technical progress from, last 50 years, and you project 1,500 years, just think what they might be doing now.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And you are making the point that everything that we look at in the universe is at a time that is far back in time from where we are right now.
Right.
And so how much further advanced, that is a very good question. But when you start ticking off, I'm not going to go through all 10, but just to give some examples of Professor Wright's contribution here, another would be if, let's say that this is a very large series of structures, because there have been so many. Whatever it is taking weeks. Stress that. It's taking weeks for each of these blockings to dim and finally become bright again asymmetrically. So there's lots of stuff. It's extremely large. And he said in one of the pieces for me in an interview, if it's a large structure blocking a star, then it will block all wavelengths of light, all colors of light, the same at the same time. But if you have a planet can have an atmosphere, and the atmosphere will selectively block some colors and not others. So you could make a distinction now as they try to get Green Bank to get onto this, and we now know that as of October 16th, with the contact from Tabitha and Professor Wright to SETI did move its Allen telescope array from its regular schedule and has been focusing on KIC, and here's another interesting thing. Instead of the narrowband scan that ATA has been on, they have now tuned to a scan for, and this is a quote from SETI, transmissions that would produce excess power over a range of wavelengths, close quote.
I'm sorry, Lynn, I'm laughing because I had Seth on. Seth was at home with pneumonia, and I called him about this story, and he said, oh, my God. And I talked to him the next day. He said, we've ordered everything to start looking at it. And I said, Seth, listen to me. If they're using that kind of power, there's bound to be gigantic electromagnetic emissions. So you might not get a discrete signal, but what you might get is a general noise level increase as you come on Tabby.
Well, that may be true, but now remember, they're trying to separate the wheat from the chaff here.
I know.
And they're going through this list of all possible things natural, which, between you and me and the other astronomers, the idea that there would be a horde of comets that would be rotating this star and causing this kind of effect, I think that just on the size level alone, that if you have things that are taking weeks to pass in dimness and brightness, that's not a group of comets. And I can't say that there's proof, but I'm trying to say they started off ticking off the natural things. Now, if you come back to this issue of the light that is coming from that sun, and depending upon what these structures are, and we can look at it with the Allen array, and they're even adding now a new kind of hardware that's going to increase the sensitivity of the Allen array by a factor of 2, and their goal is to up the odds that SETI could detect an alien signal if there was one being transmitted. And when I say that, that has been the historic search of SETI to look for the single tone. Okay, we're in a very different category when it comes to the issues of the brightening and the dimming and these structures. So now, if we turn all of these arrays and hopefully get Green Bank on this in the next 3 or 4 or 5 months, that they will look at all the wavelengths, and as Professor Wright said to me, one thing that could be quite startling is if these, what now are dimming, brightening, block out all color frequencies when they look at it with a spectrograph.
Okay, that's new to me.
Yeah, this is one of the things they're going to try. They want to see. And if it is anything that has any translucent, transparent, and atmosphere, that will, there will be some wavelengths that will get through and not. Now let's go to dust, because one of the big hypotheses is that it could be some weird form of clumps of dust going around there. This is definitely one of the things that they're going to be trying to eliminate this way. Dust lets red wavelengths through. Dust blocks blue. So if they start analyzing what are they getting between red and blue, would it confirm or not that these could be dust clumps? Well, I just read that right now SETI is saying that they have no confirmation of dust at Tabby Star at all.
Wow.
Now, if that holds up, that is a big deal.
Linda, hold it right there. Hold it right there. Yeah, that's a big deal, all right. The whole thing is a big deal. And a lot of other people out there ought to realize how big a deal this potentially could be. I'm Art Bell. Midnight in the desert, roaring in the nighttime.
And as always, we return once the musical interlude is concluded. With Linda Moulton Howe and Art Bell.
Squatty. I swear. Sometimes. Close your mouth, Arthur.
Take a walk on the wild side of midnight. From the kingdom of Nye, this is Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell. Please call the show at 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952-CALL ART.
All right, I never do this, so I'm going to do it very quickly. I assume here I'm preaching to the choir, so I don't hit you with endless advertisements for our time traveler group, but let me go ahead and mention it, because surely there are some of you out there who don't know that we have archives of every show we've done on Midnight in the Desert. And when you're a member, yeah, it's a join thing, right? When you're a member, you can go back. I think we've got like 75 to 80 shows in the tank now. You can go back and listen to any show you want anytime. It's pretty darn cool, you know, the RSS feed. So that plus access to the wormhole. The wormhole is a strange name for something where you can go and type a message to me and get it to me during the show. Now, my guest is Linda Moulton Howe. We are talking about what could be the biggest story of our lifetimes, or perhaps nothing at all, but she's bringing new information to the table with respect to the possibility of dust, and they're going to be able to rule it in or rule it out, and thus far out. What I was saying earlier was, if it is, if it's an alien civilization that has harnessed a sun, then they're using immense amounts of power for whatever, we can't probably even imagine what it would be. But a gigantic electromagnetic signature is probable. So as I mentioned to Seth at SETI, even a general noise hike, as in a lot of electromagnetic energy is being used by an entire civilization, would indicate something that would up it a notch in likelihood. And he said yes. So it's an immensely interesting story. And by the way, Linda, I heard Jupiter in front of this star would dim at about 1%, right?
That's right. It the planet world is about 1%, and with KIC Tabby's star, they've been to 22% dimming. And before the break, I was talking about this whole issue. Could they confirm dust clots or not? And right now, the latest info is that they have not been able to confirm dust. And I asked Professor Wright at Penn State, what if it isn't dust and you don't see that evidence? Then what? And he said, this is a quote, well, that's a great clue, because if it's not dust, then that really narrows it down to a large mass of objects, and I don't know. We're going to have to go to the theorists and say, quote, how do you block starlight without seeing signatures of dust, close quote? And that will be a real mystery. That will be hard to figure out. But the eureka moment that we found aliens, I don't know how to do that except for the radio waves, and that's where Green Bank will come in, and SETI will come in. And what another very interesting quote was from Professor Wright about this that adds to the fact they haven't confirmed dust. The way that Tabby's star gets dimmer is not the way it gets bright, and in fact, it gets dimmer, and then it looks like it's going to get brighter again, and then it gets dimmer again, and even dimmer. It is random. That suggests that whatever is blocking the star's light has a very complex structure. So it is something the size of a star, perhaps, itself, that is doing the blocking. But it's not a circle or a sphere. It is something with a complex shape, and there's a lot of them, because we see dozens of times the star gets dimmer. And each one of those is a separate object passing between us and the star. And remember, it's not symmetrical. It is erratic. And that leads to one of the more important quotes in just the last 2 weeks. And this came from that senior scientist, Gerald Harp, at SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute in Mountain View, California. This is his quote. We either caught something shortly after an event like two planets crashing together, or we have alien intelligence.
Right. Oh, really?
Yeah, and if dust isn't in the equation yet, that would seem to eliminate two planets crashing together. And this is really becoming so interesting because, as you and I were talking earlier, if this turns out that once they get Green Bank on it and the Allen array, and they've eliminated all of the natural possibilities, and this dimming, erratic dimming, that's multiple structures of something, they keep getting more and more data. This would be the discovery of other intelligence in the universe in our lifetimes, and this is an enormous deal.
It is. It's what we've all been waiting for. I know it's what I've been waiting for, Linda. And I say a silent little prayer. I think that it is that. But, once we know it is that, boy, I'll tell you, there's a lot of other questions and things that are to be considered. If they are that far ahead of us, or if they were at, 1,480 years ago, that far ahead of us, what are they doing with their spare time now?
And you just have to pray that advanced intelligence is not looking to take fly squatters to lower life, right, and that they are advanced both in compassion and otherwise. But that's not a given either. When you look back over the last 12 months, Elon Musk from Tesla, Bill Gates from Microsoft, and Hawking, the physicist in England, all three independently warned that one of the most dangerous things that we might have been doing on Earth was sending out the SETI signals into space without knowing what was on the receiving end. I'm not saying that to be scary. I'm just saying that those three minds in the last 12 months have been warning that maybe there is a possibility that in this big universe there might be things out there that might be dangerous.
Well, I know we did send a high-powered signal from Puerto Rico, but it was a very short duration thing, actually aimed at gaining somebody's attention like this. And I, too, am a little concerned about who might receive it and what their temperament might be when they do.
Well, remember the two crop formations, one the year August, right before 9/11, the horror, and the next year, almost to the day, in August. The first one was the binary code set right down in the front doors of the Chilbolton Observatory,
Yes.
whose work had been in contacting and listening to radio signals from stars. That's what it did. And this huge binary code is set down right in front of the front doors. And it was basically about, if you took the Sagan-Drake gold plaque with information about our DNA, the height of a human, the third planet in the star system of 9, all of the stuff that you've seen in photographs, and you sent that out and you got an answer back. And the answer came in August of 2001. It went down line by line, quite literally, everything that Sagan and Drake sent out from Arecibo was in the binary code in that wheat in front of the Chilbolton Observatory, but the differences were where we gave the nucleotides for our double helix DNA, the return answer in the wheat was a completely different, it appeared to be 3 stranded DNA.
Linda, before this conversation continues, was that particular crop circle validated in the ways that we validate crop circles, truth from baloney?
Oh, yeah. One of the first people in there was Charles Mallet. He is stringent and sharp about anything having to do with what hoaxers do versus this phenomena.
Right.
And this was, without doubt, to him and to the rest of us, this was an extraordinary pattern. And remember, I believe it was 5 days before the binary code came down literally at the front door of the Chilbolton Observatory, as if you didn't see what we put out in the wheat 5 days ago. That was the first strange face. It was sort of humanoid, and no one later could believe that this face had been out, and the people working at Chilbolton Observatory had noticed a, quote, shadow, close quote, out in the wheat. It just goes right along the border of the observatory to this day. And they had seen this shadow, and there wasn't a single person who called any authorities or went out into the wheat field. It took 5 days for a pilot to fly over and communicate to authorities that got to the observatory. Look, I'm looking at a face out of here in this wheat. And that was almost a simultaneous discovery of the face at the time of the binary, but we know the face was there before. The face was very unique. It was not exactly human. It definitely was not the gray that came the next year, and this is what I'm leading to. So we get this binary code that is answering line by line the Sagan, what they sent out in, 74, December of 1974.
And you're saying it was exactly the same, except the DNA was 3-stranded in...
Every line was different. In other words, if you took the Sagan-Drake signal that was sent out December 1974,
right.
and you took line by line by line, the binary code that came in front of Chilbolton was line by line by line, apparently the same information, just exactly like an answer, line by line, but quite different. And when it got down to the solar system, where we had 9 planets and the sun, and Sagan and Drake raised the third planet from the sun because that was Earth, and they put the raised planet right up underneath the feet of the little humanoid that they put in the signal, and they showed in our binary code that I guess you call it 2 arms, 2 legs, the bisymmetry of the humanoid was 6 feet. They showed that in binary code. Well, in this one, it was not 9 planets. The fourth circle in this much bigger solar system was raised, the fourth, and it had 4 little dots around it. And I showed that to an astronomer from Yale, Cornell. It was Cornell University. And his first reaction, without knowing that it was a crop circle, he said, that might be an interesting astronomical way to communicate a planet that had 4 moons. Never thought about that before, right? So that is in there. And the character where Drake and Sagan had a human-looking figure that said 6 feet, this was a large-headed, short, extremely short, compared to the 6-foot human, with information that the binary code translation was never quite entirely clear. But here is the subtlety and what has always stunned those of us who started going to England back in '92, like I did. In Chilbolton, on the bottom line, where Sagan and Drake had put in a glyph representing the Arecibo radar telescope, and it looked like a dish in what we sent out in December 1974. In what would be then the sender of the information that got into the Chilbolton wheat, it was identical to a crop formation the August before 2001 at Chilbolton. And so it meant that we were dealing with an intelligence that put down in front of Chilbolton's front doors in 2000 the exact glyph that went into the sender category the next year in 2001 August. These dates were almost all the same August 14th dates. 2000, then 2001 came binary code in the head. And then the next year in August of 2001 was the, let's see, make sure I'm doing this right. 2001, the binary came before 9/11, and 2002 is the next year. The formation moved a few miles to the east, and it was called Crabwood near Winchester, and this was the huge gray in a wheat field holding a big, like a disc. It was circular binary code, and it was that binary code that was translated by people all over the world about we oppose deception. There are evil forces at work. The time is growing short, but there is still time for things to be good. And that is like a third. It was like 3 acts. They showed the transmitter in front of Chilbolton one August, followed by the binary code and the strange head the next August, and the gray holding the disc with the binary code warning about deception the third.
All right, Lynn, I've got a quick question, and it is this. In police work, in investigation, when there has been a murder, particularly a horrific murder, I guess every murder is horrific in a way, they withhold a little bit of information so that as they go through sources and tips and all the rest of it, if they get somebody who confesses, they can actually then match that withheld information with, something the person says and know they've got the real killer. And I wonder if any of the information we sent out, perhaps if just one little piece of it was withheld. Of course, we can't really know that, but it would have been a wise move, don't you think?
Well, looking back now, I guess so, but I think that when Drake and Sagan sent out that gold plaque in 1974 December from Arecibo, that it was all in the context of positive, let's send this out and see what signals come back. Mm-hmm. Well, you and I and others know that going back to World War II, FDR, Truman, up to Eisenhower, they were consciously dealing with the presence of what they called celestial planforms, extraterrestrials, and that there was a decision during the Truman administration with Churchill to keep all information about extraterrestrials interacting with this planet from the public and media for at least 2 generations, that's 50 years. And from the close of World War II, 1945, you add 50 years to that. It would have been 1995 or the mid-90s that we should have learned everything that there was to learn, and instead the doors seem to slam even tighter. And today, I think you and I and people who have been riding this fucking horse for a long time, there is a sense that something is pushing open doors faster than anything, as if there's urgency now. We have to get this "we're not alone in the universe" out there, perhaps for governments to finally level with us. As Lynn Buchanan, the remote viewer, told me 6 weeks ago, that he had remote viewed for the Defense Intelligence Agency when he was at Fort Meade with Pat Price, Mel Riley, and that group. And one of his assignments was to remote view friendly and unfriendly ETs and to put them in categories of psychic and not psychic. And he said it was quite fascinating, and that there were definitely friendlies that were psychic, friendlies that were not psychic, and unfriendlies that were psychic and unfriendlies that were not, and that we are not in a completely benevolent, harmless universe. But he and so many people that I know have been in military or intel aspects of this, they really do, at the end of their work, they say the planet should know, everyone should know, because it is in knowledge that we're strengthened, we're vulnerable, and we're weakened. We are kept in the dark. And so, Art, if you feel the same thing I do, it is as if now somebody is trying to push open more and more of this information all the time. And you led with that very important story about the electromagnetic drive being confirmed by NASA.
Oh, yeah.
It's like they're saying, we are getting ready to go to Mars.
That's right. All right. Linda, hold tight. We're at a break. And we will be back. Linda Moulton House here. I'm Art Bell. And by the way, I forgot to tell you, to be a time traveler, just go to artbell.com. You're supposed to tell people how to do it, right? So if you want to travel in time and get any show we've done, artbell.com is the way to do it. You'll be instructed as you get there. It's worth doing. We do good stuff. Now I stand here helplessly.
The clock strikes 12, and Midnight in the Desert is pounding packets your way on the Dark Matter Digital Network. To call the show, please direct your finger digits to dial 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952. Call Art.
All right. Linda Moulton House here, and I can't think of anything more important to talk about or exciting than what we're talking about right now. How these crop circles relate, if they relate, I don't know, but the intricacy of them is unquestionable. Apparently the authenticity of them is thought to be very high. So, once again, here is Lynn Moulton Howe, and I understand you did an interview with Professor Wright. Now, would you like to play that interview, Linda, or do you feel that you've related already most of what he said?
Right. On future shows, we should set it up, so I'll organize around excerpts. But I think tonight that it's fun just kind of summarizing, and I can give you, though, the exact way we closed out my interview just a few weeks ago. I said, then this Tabby's star could finally be that which breaks open this question that has been there for centuries. Are we alone in the universe? We could discover advanced intelligence. It would be far away, but it could be a new reality like revolutionary breakthrough from this star, that there are advanced intelligences harvesting energy from stars, just as science fiction and others have written about. And he said, yes, that would be pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, that's the goal. That's why you work on SETI. That would be amazing if it happened. And so we should spend at least some resources trying to make it happen. And right now, I think it's encouraging that the Allen array was immediately turned. They're trying to get green bank, and they're doing all of this. And the American Association of Variable Star Observers, it's known as AAVSO, published an alert notice requesting amateurs and professional astronomers around the world to immediately begin observing KIC 846-2852. And all you have to do is go to the AAVSO website, and you just type in the KIC star number, and it's called Pick a Star. And then you create a chart of your own, and you can contribute to the study of this.
Okay, now I want to interject something, and then I want you to comment, Linda, and it is this. We talked about this with my listeners quite extensively, and I think that if they do announce or even confirm that something 1,480 light years out is the real McCoy, and we are dealing with aliens, which could be the eventual result of this story, that the world will go on, everything will be fine. However, what I did was I asked a bunch of people who called in, many of them from the South, from the Bible Belt, Linda. This is a week ago. And here was what I asked them. I said, if aliens are found, and if aliens land, and they come down the ramp, and after learning how to communicate with them, we find that either A, they don't worship a god, or B, that they just don't have the slightest idea what God is, or even the concept, how would that affect you? And these many people were in the South, I'll grant you, in the Bible Belt, but they said such a revelation to them would shatter their faith.
And I guess my comment is that I can't, I started to say believe, and I don't want to use that overworked word. I'm going to say it this way, that if my relationship from being a child to where I am now, and all the things where I should have been dead and something has saved me, and all kinds of things that have given me a really strong sense that I have an ally in what I call the divine field, and it is outside of entropy, it is outside the matter worlds, but it is the origin for the matter worlds, and that from my point of view, every living anything has the pura vida from the divine field, and therefore, if something is advanced enough to get to a point that it has survived tribal warfare or whatever else would be the evolutionary curves of life evolving in this universe or even other universes, that if it gets to a point where it can build huge structures to harvest energy from a star, I just have to think that they would not be just immediately violent savages wanting to eliminate us or other life. And so it may be naive, but I really do think that advanced intelligence, by the definition, is not going to destroy other life willy-nilly.
Okay, all right. Well, that's perfectly reasonable to say, Linda, and I'm sure you're correct. I would hope they would socially advance as we... Well, I don't know. As we are doing, I'm not sure we're doing it. We say we are, but I don't see proof of it yet. Maybe eventually we will. Either way, my point was, if they didn't know about God when they got here, even if we communicated with them and they didn't know about God, this would shatter the religious foundation and belief of really religious people. Now, if you're looking for reasons why it might not be announced, there's one in your lap.
Well, it's odd that anybody, from whether it's from any religious box or those fundamentalists in the southeastern United States, that if they feel a closeness to a divine God and Christ, why in the world would meeting non-humans that didn't affect their relationship to the cosmos?
Well, because, Linda, to them, the word is the word. There is but one God, period.
And others not believing in that God shouldn't have any impact on them.
And yet that's what they said. I mean, this is a major...
Yeah.
It's okay at 1,480 light years. People go, okay, but
it makes it safe.
Yes, it makes it safe.
It is a discovery at a safe distance.
There you have it.
Yeah.
So, you have any guesses which way this is going to go, Linda?
Well, that is a very appropriate question, and I like Jason Wright when he said, "Wow, that would be cool." I guess I want it to be structure of something that is, of course, advanced, intelligent, compassionate, benign, and that we will be introduced to other life in the universe in the best, most positive way that there can possibly be, and that is a sort of fantasy answer. The other part that is being more realistic is that we may go on for a year or so with all of these efforts to try to analyze the light signatures and trying to determine if there's any dust and all of that. And it may take much longer than we think that we're going to get an answer. And in the meantime, what I've found frustrating, like in series, it's sort of parallel, that we get something that is discovered. Last time I was on with you, Midnight into the Desert, we were talking about series. And this is, to me, sort of parallel of what kind of a world are we in now when science seems to become so political so rapidly and gets then manipulated, and that comes down to this.
Well, we're in the world of our own making.
Well, the fact that science is becoming so political is disturbing, and this is worth reporting tonight. We left off, you and I, about the excitement of the discoveries on Pluto and Ceres, and that in Ceres were the intriguing bright spots in that crater called Akator. And it's a crater, it's about 60 miles across, 2 miles deep, and in this was I think it's fair to say, a kind of pattern of very bright lights that seem to be self-glowing even in the images when the dawn was going, the planet or the planetoid was rotating, and you could still see some of the light at the horizon edges. And Christopher Russell, PhD at UCLA, he's been Don's mission principal investigator right from the beginning. He's a very, very respected planetary geophysicist. Well, he said that, to me, back in what would have been the July going into August period, he said, quote, "We're getting data from the VIR spectrometer, and I got a report back yesterday," and this was the end of August, "that all of the data over the bright spot was obtained, but the white substance is still unidentified." Close quotes. I have this on the recording. So he had told me that when we got down to 930 miles above the surface, that should be happening in the 1st of August, and to call him and we would do another interview.
Right.
And he was delightful to talk with, and he and I share this love of astronomy and planets, and we really bonded, and he said, "I would really like to do another interview with you," and I called him. And he said on the phone, "Linda, we've run into a problem." He said, we have lovely, that was his word, "we have lovely new photographs from this new orbit that has settled into about the 915, 930 miles above Ceres. But he said one of our scientists has submitted a paper to Nature. Nature is UK, remember?
Sure.
Not US, it's UK.
Right.
It's American tax dollars that are paid for this Dawn mission. But it is the UK Nature that has now embargoed all of the new photos from the 915 to 930 miles. And this is an interview that I did with Professor Christopher Russell, and everybody listening can go to my September 3rd Earth Files and read Part 1, where are new images of the bright spots on Ceres from the lower 915-mile orbit? And I say the NASA Dawn spacecraft is in its new lower mapping orbit of 915 miles above the dwarf planet's surface, but an embargo by the journal Nature is preventing the release of new images taken closer to the October.
Wait a minute, Linda, wait a minute. How can a British publication, how can they embargo pictures that the American taxpayers have paid for?
That's my question. It was my question to Professor Russell. He seemed himself to be frustrated, and here is the kicker. This was 2 full months ago, because you and I are talking now on November 3rd. I did this Earth Files report on that last discussion with Professor Russell about the fact that he couldn't release photos because they were embargoed on September 3rd, 2015. He said to me when we left off the phone discussion about the new photos and some of the things that they were seeing in the new photos, which he couldn't release, he said, look, I agree with you. I'm going to go to Nature and to the scientists and see if we can't work out some sort of a compromise here, because you're right, Linda. This is an American project, and we should be able to, all of us, share in these photos. And he said those words. And the next day...
Wait. I'm sorry, Linda. I've got a question. Who the hell made a deal with them in the first place that allows them, under any condition, to embargo?
That's what I'd like to know. It is, and he didn't have an answer beyond the fact that the paper had been submitted to Nature, which automatically embargoed the release of the photos, and the entire paper was about what the bright spots in the Akator crater could be.
So what idiot signed that on our behalf?
I don't know. And it's now 2 full months later, and all you have to do is type in a URL, news about the Akator crater bright spots, and there's nothing. There's been no image releases. And this is very germane to the question you asked about Tabby Star 1,480 light years away.
Oh.
What?
And we'll have to leave it there, so you can find out more about Ceres and Tabby Star, as Art is calling it, on our next trip to Midnight in the Desert. Apologies for the technology issues towards the end. We'll endeavor to make sure those don't occur tomorrow, but in the meantime, like, share, and subscribe. Get us to those goals of 10,000 views, 1,000 subscribers, so Boxy sends us those gifts to send to you guys, and Google will pay attention. I'm not going to go about the items. You know they're below. Take care of them. And again, until next time, make sure you do like, share, and subscribe. Be kind to one another. And it's a great new world to release the Krakens as we continue to march on here from day one. Next time we appear is 2 p.m. Eastern tomorrow afternoon. Until then, have a great night and enjoy your rest.